swallows, the rooster, the workman, my stomach, all with their elusive rhythms, their harmonies and disharmonies and counterpoint, became, as I listened, the sound of my own life speaking to me. Never had I heard just such a coming together of sounds before, and it is unlikely that I will ever hear them in just the same combination again. Their music was unique and unrepeatable and beyond describing in its freshness. I have no clear idea what the sounds meant or what my life was telling me. What does the song of a swallow mean? What is the muffled sound of a hammer trying to tell? And yet, as I listened in those sounds and listened with something more than just my hearing, I was moved by their inexpressible eloquence and suggestiveness, by the sense I had that they were a music rising up out of the mystery of not just my life, but of life itself. In much the same way, that is what I mean by saying that God speaks into or out of the thick of our days. So listen, what is it that you hear? We each live in a familiar stew of sounds. There are favorite songs, love songs, lullabies, sounds blaring from a boombox or ringtones from a cell phone that tell you who's calling you, that can tell everybody that you're getting a message. Sounds from a CD player pouring into your ears alone. The hymns. These days, if you get into an elevator, magpies croaking loudly in the morning. Now, a dozen or so would come to our bird feeders, jostling each other for the day's scraps. My youngest brother visited us, and he asked me, how could we stand all that racket? The donkey, I must say, the donkey was pretty loud. Hee-haw, hee-haw. Oh, you got used to it. It was lovely. Now, shortly after I arrived in Chicago for seminary, I asked the very same thing. How could they stand all that racket? How could anyone bear the noises of those cars, those buses, the trucks, the metro, the rapid transit system, the fire engines screaming up and down the street where I lived, and then there was the outrageous clang of garbage cans at 5 in the morning. It seemed like every morning. But you get used to it. I was told. You get used to it, and you simply don't notice it after a while, and it's true. It's true. I simply didn't notice it after a while. It helped me when I moved to Duluth with my husband, and we're on a fairly busy street. You simply don't notice it after a while. So I've been thinking, what do I hear these days? What do I hear and what don't I hear? Well, I certainly hear birds. Every morning when I wake, there's a chickadee or a crow. There are the starlings building their nest in the corner of our house. Some days there's a cardinal or a downy woodpecker. The birds chirp and squawk. They peck and cheep and sigh. There are squirrels too. The deer and the rabbits don't make so much noise. But I think I didn't always hear birds. Now, my parents' home was near a parkway, just right across the street from a parkway, and it was filled, I'm sure, with the sounds of birds, robins and cardinals and blue jays, and I don't remember any of it. I don't remember those sounds of my childhood. I simply didn't hear birds. But as an adult, one day on a bright spring afternoon, I was hiking up a fir tree covered hillside, and I was startled by a soft flap sound, and I looked up and then I looked out and I saw this eagle flying below me, flapping its wings. The soft flap. The flap opened up the sounds of nature to me, and I've been listening to her sounds ever since. Thank you, eagle. Now, Diane Ackerman, in her Natural Sense History of the Senses, and these books that I mentioned, they're mostly down here. Take a look. Diane Ackerman is a naturalist and a poet, and she writes about sound. In Arabic, absurdity is not being able to hear. Now, absurd is a mathematical impossibility. It's an irrational number like pi. It's the core of the word absurdity. Absurd we get from Latin surdus, meaning deaf or mute. Surd also, I do a lot of phonetics with the kindergartners I work with, and in phonetics, a surd is a sound that's uttered with the breath and not Logos is a translation from the Arabic Jadr Assam, which is a deaf root, which in turn is a relative of the Greek alogos, meaning no word, to be speechless or irrational in your speech. So she takes she stretches the origins a little bit, but Latin to Arabic to Greek, deaf to deaf root to irrational. Now, Ackerman writes, the assumption hidden in this etymological nest of spiders is that the world will still make sense to someone who is blind or armless or minus a nose. But if you lose your sense of hearing, a crucial thread dissolves and you lose track of life's logic. You become cut off from the daily commerce of the world as if you were a root buried beneath the soil. Sounds thicken the sensory stew of our lives, and we depend on them to help us interpret, communicate with, and express the world around us. Outer space is silent, but on Earth, almost everything can make a sound. Now, sound, of course, is vibration. So deaf people too can hear. The young deaf woman in the movie Children of a Lesser God sways and dances to the music she hears through the soles of her feet. Helen Keller listened to Enrico Caruso singing by placing her fingers on his neck. So listen, what do you hear? With too many sounds, our listening may become selective. Think about being around a 2 or 3 year old. And true hearing may stop. With too many sounds, with too much sensory overload, hearing may stop. And I don't think that I always heard pain when I encountered it. I was a nurse who worked at a local community hospital for a number of years. It was a tiny community hospital. We boasted 24 beds. It had been a busy week. I'd been in charge, and I'd been taking care of an 86-year-old woman, a woman in rapidly failing health, and a woman who was dying and then died on my shift. I called for the doctor and prepared her body for its weight in the morgue. Now, later in the week, a little girl, a 3-year-old in remission from leukemia, was rushed to our emergency room. She had Now, I still wasn't listening well, but at least I could hear a little better. So listen. What do you hear? Now, Kathy Thompson, who teaches courses on conversation at Alverno College in Milwaukee, was quoted in the Wall Street Journal as saying that we have become a nation of interrupters. At our house, Thompson says, we warn new friends to be careful because we treat conversation like a competitive sport. The first one to take a breath is considered the listener. I have a high school friend whose family was like that. They were also competitive eaters. What a group. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus told us over 2,000 years ago that God gave humans 2 ears, but only 1 mouth, that we might hear twice as much as we speak. And I wonder, do I follow that ratio? Do we follow that ratio in our relationship, in our communities, in our congregation? So listen, what do you hear? Now, listening to silence can be filled with meaning. Context is everything. The silence of a monastery in meditation, the silence filled with a room of listeners, the silence of the pulpit before I speak, the silence of illness and its long stretches of persistence, the silence of hearing loss, or the silence of a house after divorce or death. In her book, Amazing Grace, A Vocabulary of Faith, author Kathleen Norris writes of her days as an artist in elementary schools. She made a deal with her students. First, you get to make noise, all the noise that you want, and when I lower my hand, you stop. Now, she needed to explain silence to the children. Silence meant breathing normally and sitting so still that you made no noise at all. And she writes, we always had to try this more than once. A pencil would roll down someone's desk, or someone would shift in a seat. But in every case but one, over many years, I found that children were able to become so still that silence became a presence in the classroom. Some kids loved it, others weren't so sure. It's scary, a 5th grader complained to me. Why? I asked. And I believe that he got to the heart of it when he replied, it's like we're waiting for something. It's scary. Well, after hearing an exceptionally unruly class whose teacher shrieked commands at them, Norris concluded, listening is surely a prerequisite for silence. Silence undergirds listening. Silence opens the door for listening. As one of Norris's students, a little girl from a tiny town in western North Dakota, offered, silence may be fathomless. Silence may indicate despair, grief, death. The silence before a storm. No birds, no leaf sounds. You may know that silence, the silence before a twister is coming. It screams danger to those in the know. Now, life is full of silences to be listened to. Silences is scarier to listen to and much harder to find. We take a couple minutes of silence here. It's hard to find that silence. We try to find it in our congregations, if not in our daily lives sometimes for just 30 seconds, a minute or two at a time. So listen. Listen. What do you hear? What do you hear? Unitarian history speaks about people who want to discover the truth, either the small t or the capital T. We want to hear that voice of truth. We want to find out what is true in this world. We listen for that still small voice within us, voice still and small, deep within all. I hear you call. From the world. The listening for truth takes a lot of time. Truth comes in whispers, in shouts, in songs and poetry, in stillness. Truth comes in listening to the vocalized and non-vocalized strains of the world. Universalist history tells us that we all have a place at the table. God, if you want to use that word, God welcomes all to a place at the table. We welcome all to a place at the table. That is a lot of voices to listen to. Some of those voices tell us what it is easy to hear, that you are loved, that you are competent, that you are needed, and some of them tell us what it is difficult to hear, that injustice and cruelty and evil persist, and that we may be guilty in some direct or indirect way in that injustice, that cruelty. Some voices give you a message that you may hear, but that you cannot or should not listen to, that you are unlovable, that you are hopeless, that you are shameful, that you have no home, no haven of safety on this earth. We hear those voices over and over again during this season, election season. Universalism speaks a message of love and hope, of grace, of moments of unasked for and unexpected serenity of mind and clarity of purpose. Everyone a place at the table. So listen, what do you hear? Now, Barbara Brown Taylor writes, I am wondering about the place of listening in a preacher's life. Barbara Brown Taylor wonderful Episcopal priest who left the church because she listened to God. And she asked, where do you go to listen for God's silence and God's speech? Who taught you to do that, and whom have you taught to do the same thing? Silence and speech define each other. One is the inhale, the other is the exhale. Like prayer and proclamation, or meditation and preaching, they perfect each other. Although in our day, she concludes, their ecology is seriously out of whack. Now I have been thinking that here at the Wausau Universalist Unitarian Church, we are charged. We are charged by our covenants, our promises to each other, to learn how to speak with one another. Not to speak at one another, to one another, with one another. We are also called to learn how to listen. Now, I confess, sometimes I'm a pretty good listener, and sometimes I am not. Sometimes we are pretty good listeners, and sometimes we are not. Every day is a day of learning, of hope, of forgiving ourselves, of forgiving others. So listen, what do you hear? May we hear these sounds, that we are challenged to bring truth and beauty to our lives through words, through good work, through right relationship, through art and music and dance. May we hear these sounds, our breath, breathing easily, our own hearts beating steadily, our own bodies doing the best we can in an often cacophonous world. May we hear these sounds, the sweet, poignant, agitating stirrings of the world, whether of cars and sirens, of garbage cans, or chickadees, of children, a waterfall, ribbit, ribbit, plip, plop, scree, scree. May we be blessed in our listening and in our response to what we hear. May our inner ear, our metaphorical gyroscope, bring us balance, steady our course, tell us which way is up. This faith we have been called to has much listening in it. Listening to stories, listening to fears and joys, listening to our inner workings, listening to silence. So listen long, listen deep, listen rich and messy,